Who would have thought that when the man lost his direction while flying a jet fighter, a World War II bomber suddenly appeared in front of him, and it even swung its fuselage, signaling the man to follow it. The man's hope of survival was rekindled when he saw this, but he never expected it to be a ghost bomber that had disappeared for many years. An hour ago, Mark flew a fighter plane home for Christmas. Shortly after takeoff, all the airport lights went out instantly. Mark failed to notice it. He swiftly boosted the plane's thrust and ascended to 10,000 meters. After flying for an hour, there was no abnormality. Just when Mark thought he could get home on time for Christmas, several flashes suddenly appeared and the instrument started to spin around. He tapped it a few times, but the result was unchanged. He quickly opened the manual and followed the steps. The instrument didn't respond, so he urgently called the tower to request radio-assisted navigation. Despite calling several times in a row, he received no response. At 10,000 meters, the plane lost its direction and is now over the sea with little fuel remaining. Without tower assistance, running out of fuel would have disastrous consequences, which was unthinkable. He kept trying different operations, hoping someone would hear his call. Then, he turned around and saw a thick fog in the sky. This further disoriented him, making it impossible to find his way. If the plane kept flying like this, he would have no chance of survival. He quickly decreased the plane's speed and descended to an altitude of less than 10,000 meters in a spiral. This would save fuel, but if he still couldn't get help from the tower, even if the editor came, he couldn't save him. After 20 minutes, he couldn't bear it anymore. His mentality began to collapse. Despair, anxiety, pain, helplessness, and various emotions began to emerge. Just when he was about to give up, he suddenly saw a bomber appeared in front of us on the right. The bomber waved its wings to greet him, signaling that he was saved. The pilot then communicated with him and discovered that he was lost and had only 3 bars of fuel left. He needed to land immediately. Soon, the pilot asked Mark to follow him and take him to the nearest airport. The plane slowly changed course under the pilot's constant guidance, entering the airspace above an airport. Shortly after, Mark landed successfully. However, as he was about to enter the runway, the bomber pilot turned around and flew away quickly. After Mark walked out of the cockpit, he saw a car parked here. He said that he was an airport staff and was here to take him to the restaurant. Mark saw many names and ages on the restaurant wall. They were all from a flight squadron at a military airport. The pilots were young men in their 20s, the same age as Mark. During World War II, bombing missions were carried out consecutively. Despite their impending mental breakdown, the people continued with the mission. In the end, most of them did not return here. Suddenly, Mark was attracted by a photo. When he got closer, he found that it looked very similar to the pilot who had just guided him to land. He immediately asked the staff who this was. The staff said that his name was John. He was a member of the Italian Pathfinder Squadron and flew a Venturi bomber. He was the top pilot here, but he always flew on every mission. After completing the mission, he will return alone. He took off again in a fighter plane to search for damaged fighter planes over the North Sea and guide them back to the base due to heavy fog, which often caused malfunctioning planes to lose their way. Hearing this, Mark said that he was guided here by John tonight, but the staff said that this was absolutely impossible because John and his plane crashed in the North Sea shortly after he took off in a bomber on Christmas Eve in 1943. 14 years ago tonight, Mark was a little confused. Was he hallucinating? Suddenly, he heard the sound of a bomber. He rushed out and looked up into the sky, but saw nothing. When he turned around, he found a vehicle coming towards him. Military personnel reported seeing Mark disappear halfway through his flight on the radar. They didn't expect him to land here. Mark said he was guided to land here and a staff member helped him turn on the runway lights. This was incredible to the 2 soldiers. He said this place had been abandoned for many years after the end of World War II. Mark looked back at the now crowded restaurant. Some believe this is Mark's pre-death fantasy, while others see it as the third-person effect. Your opinion, audience?